Captured by an Apache women's tribe, the lonely rancher won the heart of every woman. The sun rose slowly over the rolling plains, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. A light breeze rustled through the tall grasses, carrying the faint scent of earth and wildflowers. On this quiet morning, far from the nearest town or road, a solitary rancher named Daniel rode his old, sturdy horse along the ridge of his land. Daniel was a man of simple habits, used to working from dawn until dusk on his ranch. He had never married and had no family nearby. The few neighbors he had were miles away, separated by fields, forests, and rivers. Life for him had always been about routine, feeding the animals, fixing fences, tending crops, and mending tools. He found peace in the quiet, though a deep loneliness lingered in his heart. Daniel's ranch was modest but functional. A small wooden cabin stood near a creek, surrounded by a few barns and pens for his animals. His cattle and horses were his constant companions, and he took pride in caring for them as if they were family. Despite the isolation, Daniel was content. He didn't crave wealth or comfort beyond what the land could provide. He enjoyed the simplicity of life, but in the long hours of silence, he often thought about what it would be like to have someone to share his days with, someone to talk to, someone who could understand the quiet that surrounded him. Yet he had grown used to the emptiness and accepted it as part of who he was. One morning, as Daniel rode along the edge of a forest that bordered his ranch, he noticed something unusual. The trees were dense here, and the shadows seemed darker than usual. He had never ventured too far into this part of the forest before. Today, curiosity and a sense of adventure pulled him forward. Perhaps he was seeking a change in routine, or perhaps he simply wanted to feel the thrill of exploring unknown land. Either way, he guided his horse carefully along a narrow path, listening to the soft crunch of leaves beneath the hooves. As he moved deeper, he felt a strange tension in the air. Birds fell silent, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's instincts told him to turn back, but he pressed on, reminding himself that he had crossed wild lands before and always returned safely. He kept his eyes sharp, scanning the underbrush for any signs of danger. And then he saw them, figures moving gracefully among the trees. At first, he thought they might be travelers or settlers, but as they stepped into view, he realized they were women. Not ordinary women from nearby towns, but women dressed in clothing made from natural materials, moving with a confidence and strength that seemed unusual to him. There was a calm authority in their eyes, and their gazes met his with both curiosity and caution. Before he could speak, the women surrounded him. There was no aggression in their stance, yet Daniel felt the weight of their presence, the seriousness in their attention. They were part of a tribe, he realized, and perhaps not used to outsiders. He dismounted slowly, showing that he meant no harm. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, hoping they would understand that he came in friendship, not as a threat. For a moment, there was silence, the kind of silence that carries tension but also potential. Then one of the women stepped forward, older than the rest, her eyes sharp yet not cruel. She spoke softly, though Daniel did not understand the language. Still, her tone was firm enough that he could sense she was the leader among them. The women gestured for him to follow. Daniel hesitated but saw no choice. The women had already decided he must come with them. He sensed that resisting would only make things more difficult. With his hands still raised, he allowed himself to be led through the forest. He noticed their movements were careful and organized, as if they had done this many times before with travelers or intruders. Despite the fear that tightened his chest, Daniel also felt a strange sense of calm. He had faced many challenges on the ranch, storms, wild animals, accidents, and he had learned that panic rarely helped. So he breathed deeply, trusting that he could rely on patience and respect to navigate this new and uncertain situation. As they walked, Daniel observed everything carefully. The forest around him was alive in ways he had never noticed before. The sunlight broke through the trees in golden beams, illuminating patches of moss and ferns. Birds flitted through the branches, and small animals scurried in the underbrush. It was a world he had seen from afar but never entered so closely. And here, in this quiet beauty, he felt a strange connection to the land that seemed almost sacred. It was a place where rules were different, where life followed patterns he had never fully understood. And he knew that if he wanted to survive here, he must respect those patterns and earn the trust of the people guiding him. After what felt like hours but was likely less, they arrived at a clearing. In the center stood a cluster of simple homes made of natural materials, wood, reeds, and mud, blending seamlessly with the landscape. Smoke rose gently from small fires, carrying the smell of cooking herbs and wood. The women led him to the edge of the village and gestured for him to wait. From this distance, Daniel could see more of the tribe emerging. Their movements were graceful, almost choreographed, as they went about their daily tasks. Children ran and played near the homes, laughing in voices that reminded him of the innocence and joy that existed even in hard lives. He realized that life here was different from what he knew, but it was not cruel or unkind. It was just unfamiliar. Daniel's mind raced with questions. Who were these women? How long had they lived in this hidden part of the forest? What would they do with him? And most importantly, how could he show them that he meant no harm, that he could be trusted? He remembered the advice his father had given him long ago. Respect earns respect, Daniel. Even in the wildest places, kindness speaks louder than words. With this thought, he lowered his shoulders, relaxed his stance, and let his natural calmness guide him. He greeted them with a simple nod, showing that he came in peace. As the day passed, the women observed him carefully. They watched how he moved, how he spoke, how he reacted to new surroundings. Daniel did not try to impress them with words or feats of skill. He simply followed their guidance, offered help when asked, and kept a respectful distance when needed. Slowly, the tension began to ease. The women exchanged glances, whispered to each other, and sometimes even smiled briefly at his quiet demeanor. Daniel felt a spark of hope. Perhaps they could see that he was different from other outsiders, gentle, patient, and respectful. Perhaps they were willing to let him prove himself. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, Daniel was given a small space to rest. It was modest, a simple mat near one of the fires, but it was safe. He sat quietly, watching the women move about, tending to chores and speaking in soft voices. He felt a strange mixture of awe and gratitude. Despite being a stranger in their midst, he was allowed to exist among them without immediate hostility. The fear that had gripped him in the morning began to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of belonging. He realized that life, even in the most unexpected places, could offer moments of peace and connection. As night fell, Daniel reflected on the day's events. He thought about his lonely life on the ranch, the quiet mornings and long evenings, the solitude he had once accepted without question. Here, in the forest with this tribe, he felt something different, a spark of curiosity, a sense of challenge, and perhaps the first stirrings of friendship. He understood that his journey was only beginning, and that the days ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. Yet for the first time in a long while, he felt a small glimmer of hope. He might be far from home, surrounded by strangers, but he was alive, he was learning, and he was ready to face whatever came next with patience, respect, and an open heart. The night deepened and the sounds of the forest enveloped him. Crickets chirped, owls called, and the wind whispered through the trees. Daniel lay on his mat, staring at the stars through the canopy, and let his mind wander. He thought about the land he had left behind, the animals he cared for, and the life he had known. But he also thought about the tribe, the women who had captured him not with force, but with the quiet power of observation and trust. He realized that perhaps this unexpected encounter was not a misfortune, but an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect with people who lived by principles he had never fully understood. By the time sleep came, Daniel felt a sense of calm he had not felt in years. He had been taken from the life he knew and placed into a world that was strange, challenging, and full of unknowns. Yet through his patience, respect, and quiet strength, he had already begun to earn the attention and trust of those around him. The loneliness that had defined him for so long seemed, for the first time, to be a thing of the past. And as he drifted off under the blanket of stars, he could not help but wonder what the next day would bring, what lessons he would learn, and how his life might change forever in the company of these remarkable women. The morning light came slowly over the forest, filtering through the leaves in thin golden rays. Daniel woke on his simple mat, still feeling the unfamiliar comfort of the tribe's presence around him. The sounds of the village stirred him from sleep, the crackle of small fires, the soft murmur of voices, and the laughter of children playing near the wooden homes. Though he was far from his own ranch, far from the open plains he had always called home, he did not feel fear as he had the previous day. Instead, he felt curiosity. The world around him was alive in ways he had never noticed, and he realized that understanding it would take patience and respect. He rose carefully, mindful of not disturbing anyone. One of the younger women approached him quietly. She carried a small bundle of food wrapped in leaves. Though she did not speak a language he understood, her gestures were clear. She handed him the bundle with a smile, nodding as if to say, "Eat, and you will have strength for today." Daniel accepted it with gratitude, bowing his head slightly to show respect. He unpacked the bundle to find simple bread, dried meat, and fresh fruit. The food was unfamiliar but wholesome, and it reminded him that the tribe lived close to the land, taking only what they needed and using every resource wisely. As he ate, Daniel noticed that the tribe was already hard at work. Some women tended to gardens, pulling weeds and planting seeds. Others cared for small animals, feeding them and cleaning their pens. A few gathered firewood or carried water from the nearby creek. Each movement seemed purposeful, as though every person knew exactly what was expected of them and how their work contributed to the community. Daniel realized that life here was structured differently from the ranch. There were no rigid rules imposed by law, but there was a rhythm, a natural order that kept the tribe functioning smoothly. He wanted to help. He stepped forward cautiously, offering to carry a small bundle of firewood. The older woman who had greeted him the previous day watched carefully but nodded in approval. Daniel moved slowly, not wanting to appear clumsy or disrespectful. As he lifted the wood and carried it across the clearing, he felt the first stirrings of connection. The women began to smile more openly at him, their earlier cautious glances softening. They saw that he was willing to work without complaint, and that he did not expect praise or reward for helping. This simple humility, the way he treated the task as important rather than burdensome, earned him the first hints of trust. As the sun climbed higher, the tribe decided to introduce him to more of their daily routines. One woman led him to a small area where herbs and vegetables were grown. She pointed to the plants and gestured for him to observe. Daniel knelt beside the soil, noting the careful arrangement of each plant and the methodical watering techniques. The woman demonstrated how to trim the leaves, remove dead stems, and check the soil for moisture. Daniel followed her instructions diligently, making sure to mirror her movements precisely. Though he struggled at first, he soon discovered that his years of tending his own land had given him skills that translated well to this new environment. By midday, Daniel had already helped in several tasks. He carried water, helped prepare a fire for cooking, and assisted with mending a broken fence near the animals. With each action, he gained the attention and respect of the tribe. The children, who had initially watched him with wide-eyed curiosity, began to approach him without fear. One small boy offered him a stick to help with a task, and Daniel accepted it warmly, showing patience and care as he demonstrated how to use it correctly. Laughter rang out as the boy followed his example, and Daniel felt a deep warmth in his heart. It was a rare joy to connect with others without words, to communicate through actions, trust, and shared effort. In the afternoon, the older women gathered Daniel to observe a more complex ritual of daily life. They were preparing food for the evening meal and showing him the process of grinding grains, mixing herbs, and cooking over open flames. Daniel watched carefully, making mental notes of each step. When asked to participate, he followed instructions closely, letting his hands learn the rhythm of the work. Mistakes were met with gentle correction rather than harsh criticism. A soft smile, a guiding hand, or a nod of approval communicated more than words ever could. Daniel began to understand that the tribe valued patience, respect, and attentiveness above all else. His quiet demeanor, which might have been a liability among other people, was now a strength. By late afternoon, Daniel had become more comfortable in his surroundings. He walked through the village, observing daily life. He noticed the way the women taught the children important skills, how to gather food safely, how to respect animals, and how to move quietly through the forest without disturbing it. They treated the young ones with care and patience, never raising their voices unnecessarily. Daniel realized that the tribe's strength lay not in physical power alone, but in knowledge, organization, and the careful transmission of culture. They had created a system that worked in harmony with the land and with each other, and he felt honored to be allowed even a small role in it. As the sun began to set, Daniel joined the women by a fire, helping to arrange food for the evening meal. The smell of cooked grains and roasted vegetables filled the air. He sat quietly, watching the tribe eat together, noticing the conversations, gestures, and laughter. Though he did not understand the words, he felt the meaning through tone and expression. The women's eyes occasionally met his, and he saw approval, curiosity, and even a hint of amusement in their faces. They were beginning to accept him not just as a helper, but as a person worthy of their attention and respect. After the meal, the tribe gathered near the central fire to tell stories, a tradition Daniel had not expected. Though he could not understand the words, he observed the gestures, the rhythm of speech, and the expressive faces. The stories spoke of nature, survival, and history, and Daniel felt a deep connection to their message. He realized that knowledge was passed not only through speech, but also through observation and example. The tribe valued listening as much as talking, and Daniel found that he could participate in their culture by simply watching, learning, and showing respect through his actions. Night fell over the village, and the forest around them became quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of leaves. Daniel found himself reflecting on the day. He had entered this world as a stranger, uncertain and afraid. Yet by showing patience, humility, and willingness to help, he had begun to earn a place among these women. He understood that trust was not given lightly, and that he would need to continue demonstrating respect, courage, and care if he hoped to be fully accepted. And strangely, for the first time in years, he felt less lonely. He realized that connection could be built slowly, through shared effort, respect for others, and small acts of kindness. That night, as Daniel lay on his mat, he could hear the soft breathing of the tribe members nearby, the gentle crackle of the fire, and the distant call of forest animals. He thought about his ranch, his simple life of isolation, and the world he had always known. But he also felt a growing bond with this new environment, this new community, and he wondered how far it could grow. The women had begun to see his character, his patience, and his humility. In return, he had begun to see their strength, intelligence, and resilience. In this quiet corner of the forest, separated from the rest of the world, Something new was beginning, something that neither fear nor misunderstanding could easily destroy. Over the following days, Daniel's role among the tribe continued to grow. He learned to help with more complex tasks, such as repairing tools, preparing food for larger groups, and assisting with animal care. He discovered that he had skills that complemented their daily routines, and that the tribe appreciated effort done sincerely and quietly. With each passing day, he became more confident, not because he had mastered their ways immediately, but because he had begun to understand the importance of patience, observation, and respect. The women began to trust him in small but significant ways. They allowed him to help care for the younger children, trusting that he would not harm or neglect them. They invited him to assist in gathering food from the forest, confident that he could follow instructions and remain alert to danger. Daniel noticed that their glances toward him now carried more warmth, less caution, and sometimes a hint of curiosity. For the first time, he felt that he was more than a visitor or a captive. He was becoming a part of their daily life, even if he was still learning and far from fully accepted. By the end of the second week, Daniel could see a subtle but clear change in the tribe's behavior toward him. They no longer watched his every move with suspicion. Instead, they interacted with him as they would with any member of the community learning the ways of the tribe. He had earned a measure of respect not through words, gifts, or promises, but through consistent patience, humility, and service. And in this process, Daniel himself had begun to change. He felt more confident, more connected, and more aware of the value of community, trust, and shared responsibility. As night fell once more, Daniel reflected on how much he had learned in just a few days. He had come to the tribe as a stranger, captured by circumstance, unsure of what the future held. Yet, through observation, patience, and quiet effort, he had begun to earn trust and respect. The loneliness that had defined his life on the ranch seemed distant, replaced by a sense of belonging that had been foreign to him for so long. He realized that true connection was not about words alone, but about consistent actions, integrity, and the willingness to serve and learn from others. In this way, Daniel's first weeks with the tribe became a turning point in his life. He discovered that even in unexpected and challenging circumstances, a man could find purpose, respect, and a sense of community. The tribe had not only given him safety, but had opened the door to a new understanding of human connection, trust, and shared life. Daniel knew that the days ahead would bring further challenges and lessons, but he also knew that he had the patience, humility, and determination to face them. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel had fully settled into the rhythm of life among the tribe. The initial uncertainty and fear that had accompanied his arrival had long faded, replaced by familiarity and a growing sense of connection. Each morning he awoke to the sounds of the village, the laughter of children, the soft chatter of women preparing their daily chores, and the rustling of animals. No longer a stranger, he now understood that trust and respect were not simply given, but earned through consistent, quiet effort. His patience, humility, and willingness to serve without complaint had begun to weave him into the fabric of their lives. From the first moments of his integration, Daniel had focused on observation. He watched carefully how the tribe worked together, how responsibilities were divided, and how each individual contributed to the whole. Every movement had meaning, every action had purpose. Now, as he worked alongside them daily, he was no longer simply an observer. He was an active participant. He repaired broken tools, helped carry heavy loads, and tended to the animals with a care that mirrored the dedication of the women around him. His movements were deliberate, steady, and calm, and the tribe noticed. They began to trust him not only with tasks but with their presence, allowing him to share spaces that had once been off-limits. The children, in particular, had begun to bond with him. At first, they had been shy, watching him cautiously from a distance, unsure if he would respond kindly. But Daniel had a gentle way with them. He did not speak in harsh tones, nor did he attempt to control or discipline them unnecessarily. Instead, he guided them with patience, showing how to carry water safely, how to identify edible plants, and how to care for small animals. The children responded with smiles, laughter, and trust. Occasionally, they would race toward him in the morning to help with tasks or simply to sit beside him as he worked. These small connections, seemingly ordinary, became some of Daniel's most cherished moments. They reminded him that acceptance could grow through kindness and consistency, rather than force or argument. The women of the tribe also began to notice qualities in Daniel that went beyond mere helpfulness. They saw the way he treated each individual with respect, listening carefully and observing before acting. He did not rush, nor did he assume he understood their ways better than they did. Instead, he followed instructions diligently and asked questions respectfully when needed. His humility and willingness to learn earned their admiration. While others might have seen him as a stranger or a guest, they began to see him as a man of character, someone who could be trusted not only with tasks, but with the responsibilities of living within the tribe. One afternoon, the older women decided to test Daniel's understanding of their customs in a small but meaningful way. They led him to a clearing near the creek, where they demonstrated a ritual for gathering water safely and respectfully. The ritual involved careful attention to the natural surroundings, including the plants, animals, and even the position of the sun. The women explained, through gestures and examples, that this practice ensured balance and respect for the land that sustained them. Daniel watched intently, absorbing every detail. Then they asked him to perform the ritual himself. At first, he moved slowly, hesitant, not wanting to make a mistake, but the women observed without interference, and gradually he began to understand the rhythm. His hands moved with precision, his eyes scanning for the smallest details, and he completed the task correctly. A subtle smile passed among the women, a quiet acknowledgement of his learning and dedication. By the following week, Daniel's integration into daily life became more pronounced. The tribe began to rely on him not only for physical tasks, but also for problem solving. When a fence collapsed under the weight of a small herd, Daniel suggested a method of repair that combined his own ranch experience with the tribe's traditional techniques. They accepted his approach, and the repair was completed more efficiently than it might have been otherwise. This small success strengthened the tribe's respect for him, not because he had claimed authority, but because he had offered thoughtful assistance without overstepping boundaries. He had become a trusted presence, someone whose guidance could be sought without threat to the tribe's traditions. As Daniel continued to work alongside the tribe, he noticed subtle shifts in the women's behavior toward him. Their glances became warmer, their smiles more frequent, and their gestures toward him more inclusive. They began to invite him to share in moments that were once private, preparing special meals, tending to medicinal herbs, and participating in small cultural rituals. Each invitation, though modest, was a sign of trust and acceptance. Daniel understood that their recognition of his character was not given lightly. It was earned through patience, respect, and consistent effort over time. And he felt a quiet pride in this connection, though he never sought praise or acknowledgement for his actions. Evenings became times of reflection and connection. After the day's work, the tribe would gather near the central fire, sharing stories, lessons, and laughter. Daniel often sat quietly among them, listening attentively. Though he could not understand all the words, he sensed the meaning through tone, gesture, and context. He recognized the importance of these moments, not as entertainment, but as a means of reinforcing values, history, and shared identity. He began to imitate the gestures, participate in the rhythms, and offer assistance in small ways. The women noticed and appreciated his engagement, and over time, he became a valued part of these gatherings, contributing through presence and respect rather than speech alone. One particular day marked a turning point in Daniel's relationship with the tribe. A sudden storm had rolled in from the west, bringing strong winds and heavy rain. The women worked quickly to secure homes, cover supplies, and ensure that animals were safe. Daniel immediately joined in, carrying water to flooded areas, securing tools, and assisting wherever needed. His calm demeanor and steady hands proved invaluable in the chaos. The women observed how he remained composed, focused, and helpful under pressure. By the time the storm passed, Daniel had not only contributed to the tribe's safety, but had also earned a deeper level of trust and admiration. They began to see him not as a newcomer or outsider, but as someone who could be relied upon in times of need. Over the following days, Daniel noticed a new dynamic emerging. The tribe's women began seeking his input on small decisions, asking for his opinion when considering certain tasks or changes in routines. Though he never imposed himself, his suggestions were valued because they were offered with humility and practicality. This subtle shift marked a transformation in his role. He was no longer just a helper or learner, but a respected participant in the daily life of the tribe. And with this change, Daniel himself began to feel a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. His lonely heart, which had carried years of isolation on the ranch, felt lighter, more connected, and more hopeful. The children, too, had grown fond of him. They would often gather around as he worked, asking questions through gestures or playful mimicry. Daniel found joy in teaching them, demonstrating small skills and encouraging their curiosity. He realized that these moments of connection were as meaningful to him as they were to the children. They reminded him that relationships could be built slowly, through care, patience, and shared experiences. He began to understand that his presence, consistent and respectful, had the power to influence the tribe in quiet but meaningful ways. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's life became a balance of learning, helping, and observing. He continued to master the tribe's routines, contribute to their work, and participate in their gatherings. The women's admiration for him grew, not because of his strength or appearance, but because of his unwavering integrity, humility, and willingness to serve. He had become a man whose actions spoke louder than words, a man whose quiet strength inspired respect and affection. In return, Daniel found himself learning valuable lessons about community, trust, and the interconnectedness of life. He realized that leadership was not about dominance, but about service. That respect was earned through consistency and sincerity, and that love and admiration could grow quietly, without force or expectation. Evenings remained a time of reflection. Daniel would sit by the fire, watching the women and children, listening to the sounds of the forest, and thinking about how much his life had changed. He remembered the lonely rancher he had once been, isolated and uncertain, and marveled at the journey that had brought him here. He realized that life among the tribe had taught him more than any solitary day on the ranch ever could. It had taught him patience, humility, empathy, and the power of quiet action. And in this learning, he found a sense of fulfillment he had never known, a feeling that he was part of something larger than himself, connected to people who valued integrity, kindness, and shared effort. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, Daniel had fully embraced his new life. He was no longer a stranger captured by circumstance. He was a respected member of the tribe, a trusted helper, and a figure of quiet admiration. The bond between him and the women had deepened, built on mutual respect, shared work, and a growing understanding of each other's strengths and values. Though he had not sought recognition, he had earned it naturally through the consistent application of his character. And for Daniel, this was more rewarding than any reward he could have imagined. As he drifted to sleep under the canopy of stars, Daniel reflected on the journey so far. He understood that the days ahead would continue to bring challenges, lessons, and opportunities for growth. But he also knew that he had learned a fundamental truth. Respect and admiration were born from integrity, patience, and genuine care for others. He had come to the tribe as a lonely, isolated man, unsure of his place in the world. Now he was a trusted, valued, and respected part of a community, experiencing a connection and fulfillment that he had never known before. And in this quiet transformation, Daniel began to see a path forward, not just as a helper, but as someone capable of forming lasting bonds, earning trust, and contributing meaningfully to the lives of others. He had learned that true strength lay not in dominance or pride, but in humility, consistency, and respect. And with each passing day, the admiration of the women grew, not because of his words or gestures, but because of the quiet, unwavering character he displayed in every action, every decision, and every moment of shared life. The days that followed felt different for Daniel. He had grown comfortable in the rhythm of the tribe's life, yet he sensed that something deeper was beginning to take shape, not just his understanding of their world, but the feelings they had for him and the bond he felt toward them. What had started as simple trust and respect had slowly evolved into something more meaningful, though quiet and unspoken. Each day brought small gestures of recognition, subtle smiles, and the occasional glance that lingered just a little longer than before. Daniel had never sought admiration, and yet he now realized that the women of the tribe saw in him something that went beyond helpfulness. They saw kindness, patience, humility, and a steady heart. Morning light filled the village again, painting the huts and the forest with soft gold. Daniel rose early, as he had every day, helping with the chores, carrying water, and tending to the animals. The women moved around him with ease, trusting him to participate fully in every task. Even the youngest children ran to him, asking for guidance or simply to share a small moment of connection. He smiled warmly, gently guiding the children and letting them learn through hands-on experience. These interactions, so small on the surface, had a profound effect on both him and the tribe. The children learned skills, patience, and respect for the land, while Daniel felt the quiet satisfaction of shaping young minds with care and empathy. Over time, Daniel found that he could anticipate the needs of the tribe before being asked. He learned which plants were ready for harvest, which animals required extra attention, and even the moods of individual members. His presence had become a comfort to them, a steady and reliable part of daily life. The women began to include him in decisions and routines that had once been reserved for long-standing members of the tribe. Whether it was organizing communal tasks, preparing food for gatherings, or tending to the health and safety of the children, Daniel's input was valued. He had become part of the natural order, a trusted presence who complemented their traditions rather than challenging them. One day, a situation arose that would further solidify his place in the tribe. A young girl had wandered too close to a steep cliff while chasing a small animal. She lost her balance and began to fall, but Daniel reacted instantly. With calm precision, he reached her just in time, catching her gently and pulling her to safety. The entire village paused, holding its breath as he ensured she was unharmed. The mother of the child rushed forward, embracing her daughter with tears in her eyes, and Daniel stood quietly, offering reassurance. That simple act of protection resonated deeply with the women and children alike. It was not just the courage he had shown, but the care, composure, and respect for the child's well-being that earned him lasting admiration. From that moment, he was no longer merely a helper or trusted worker. He was a protector, a figure of calm strength in moments of crisis. The days continued, and the bond between Daniel and the tribe deepened. He began to understand their traditions more fully, the rhythms of work, the importance of the land, and the subtle lessons embedded in daily routines. They invited him to participate in more significant ceremonies, not because he was an outsider, but because they recognized his respect for their customs and his sincerity in observing and learning. Daniel accepted these invitations humbly, participating fully but without seeking attention. Each ceremony, whether it involved music, dance, or symbolic acts, taught him more about the values that shaped the tribe: harmony with nature, respect for each individual, and the importance of community. Through these shared experiences, Daniel felt a growing sense of belonging that he had never known on his isolated ranch. Evenings became moments of shared reflection and quiet intimacy. Daniel would sit with the women near the central fire, listening as they shared stories, laughter, and wisdom. Though he could not always understand their words, he absorbed their meanings through tone, gesture, and context. The women, in turn, came to appreciate his presence, not just for the work he contributed, but for the calm, steady, and genuine manner in which he engaged with them. Their respect had evolved into admiration, and the admiration had grown into a quiet affection. They found comfort in his company, and Daniel, for the first time in years, felt a deep emotional connection to people who valued him not for what he owned, but for who he was. Daniel also began to experience personal growth. The lessons of the tribe had taught him patience, humility, and the power of quiet observation. He reflected on his previous life, the lonely rancher who had measured days by the work he completed and the silence he endured, and realized how much he had changed. He understood that true fulfillment came not from solitude or material success, but from meaningful connections, mutual respect, and shared life experiences. The tribe had shown him a new way to live, one rooted in compassion, understanding, and the value of trust built over time. As the weeks passed, Daniel noticed that the women sought him out more frequently, not for chores or tasks, but for his company and counsel. They trusted him with small secrets, asked his advice in delicate matters, and included him in planning for the future. Though he did not seek authority, his presence had become influential in quiet ways. The tribe recognized that he could be counted upon to act with integrity, empathy, and wisdom. Daniel realized that this bond was rare and precious. It was not formed through force or charm, but through consistent demonstration of character. One evening, the tribe gathered around the central fire for a larger communal event, celebrating the changing of the seasons and the abundance of the land. Daniel stood among them, participating fully and observing the rituals with reverence. He watched the women sing, dance, and share stories that had been passed down for generations. Children ran and played nearby, while the elders oversaw the ceremony with calm authority. In this moment, Daniel understood the depth of his journey. He had come to the tribe as a captive, unsure of his place or future, and now he stood as a trusted, valued, and respected member of the community. The admiration he had quietly earned had transformed into genuine affection, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the people who had welcomed him so completely. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's relationships with the women deepened even further. He learned to recognize individual strengths, preferences, and personalities. He offered help tailored to each person, whether guiding a young girl in gathering herbs or assisting an elder with a heavy task. His actions were deliberate, thoughtful, and considerate, earning him both respect and affection. The tribe had not only accepted him but had allowed him to grow alongside them, becoming part of their extended family. Daniel felt a sense of belonging that filled the void he had carried for so long, a void left by years of isolation and solitude. Despite his deepening bond, Daniel never forgot the lessons of humility and patience. He knew that admiration and respect were not permanent. They required ongoing demonstration of character and sincerity. Each day, he continued to work diligently, observe carefully, and engage meaningfully. In return, the women continued to include him in their lives, valuing not just his physical assistance but his presence, his insight, and his integrity. This mutual respect formed the foundation of their relationship, a quiet understanding that transcended words and was rooted in shared experience and trust. One day, a group of women approached Daniel with a special request. They asked him to help build a small structure for the children, a place where they could play safely and learn new skills. Daniel accepted eagerly, recognizing the importance of contributing to the community in a tangible way. He worked alongside them, offering guidance and effort, but always with humility and care. By the end of the day, the structure was complete, a small, sturdy space that symbolized collaboration, trust, and shared purpose. The women and children celebrated their work, and Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that this was more than a simple task. It was a representation of his integration into the tribe and the bond that had formed over time. As time passed, Daniel's presence became indispensable in the tribe's daily life. He continued to offer help, guidance, and support, always with respect and humility. The admiration of the women and the affection of the children grew naturally, rooted in the consistent demonstration of character and care. Daniel had come to the tribe as a stranger, captured by circumstance, and now he had become a beloved member of the community. His life had transformed in ways he could not have imagined, replacing loneliness with connection, fear with trust, and isolation with belonging. Evenings were filled with quiet reflection and gratitude. Daniel often sat by the fire, watching the tribe interact and marveling at the depth of their relationships. He thought about his journey, from a solitary rancher to a respected and admired member of a vibrant community. He understood that the true value of life lay not in possessions, wealth, or solitude, but in the bonds formed through patience, humility, and consistent care. The tribe had shown him a new way to live, one that embraced connection, empathy, and shared purpose. In the end, Daniel realized that he had been given more than acceptance. He had been given love, respect, and a sense of belonging that filled the emptiness he had carried for so long. The admiration of the women and the trust of the children were not born from force or charm, but from the quiet integrity he had demonstrated every day. He had become a man valued not for what he could do alone, but for how he contributed to the lives of others with patience, humility, and care. As he drifted to sleep under the stars, surrounded by the sounds of the forest and the quiet breathing of the tribe, Daniel reflected on the transformation that had taken place. He had entered this world uncertain and fearful, and now he was a man connected, respected, and loved. The bond he had formed with the women of the tribe was lasting and profound, a testament to the power of character, patience, and mutual respect. Daniel knew that he would never be the same man who had once lived alone on his ranch. His heart had expanded, his life had deepened, and he had discovered a sense of fulfillment that would remain with him forever. In the quiet of the night, Daniel felt at peace. He had been captured not only by circumstance, but also by the hearts of those around him, by the respect, admiration, and affection of a community that had welcomed him completely. He understood that true connection was earned through integrity, humility, and shared experience. And as he closed his eyes, he realized that his journey had brought him exactly what he had longed for all his life, not just survival, but belonging, love, and a place in the hearts of others.